Magyarization and its discontents. How Hungary governed its minorities in the dual monarchy. Hungarian governance in the dual monarchy offers a near-textbook case of how a politically insecure elite can wield state power with such zealous overconfidence that it ends up alienating almost everyone except itself. When Austria-Hungary was created in 1867, the Hungarian half emerged triumphant. After centuries of Habsburg dominance, the Magyar political class finally secured control over the lands of the Crown of St. Stephen. Yet instead of building an inclusive civic framework, Budapest chose a strategy that one might politely call assertive nation-building, and less politely call national homogenization with a moustache. This approach was personified by Prime Minister Kálmán Tisza, who built a centralized administration that treated minority demands as political irritants, illustrated, for example, by his refusal to recognize Romanian delegates at the 1881 Sibiu National Assembly. The heart of the problem was Magyarization, a program aiming to transform the multi-ethnic population of Hungary into loyal Hungarian-speaking patriots. In noble theory, it promised cohesion. In practice, it resembled asking millions of people to abandon their languages, traditions, and identities for the sake of a political project that was neither negotiated nor desired. This policy manifested in concrete measures such as the systematic replacement of non-Hungarian county officials with Magyar administrators, for example in Turok County, where the Slovak-speaking local leadership was dismissed wholesale after 1874. It was especially heavy-handed towards Slovaks, Romanians, Serbs, Ruthenians and Croats, who collectively outnumbered the Magyars in many regions, notably in Transylvania, where Romanians constituted over 55% of the population, according to the 1850 Austrian census. Education became the first and sharpest instrument of homogenization. The 1907 Apony laws forced minority schools to teach Hungarian as the primary language of instruction, regardless of whether the pupils actually spoke it at home, or indeed at all. The notorious Apony requirement that children be able to express themselves fluently in Hungarian by the fourth year of primary school led to over 400 Slovak village schools being closed or reorganized in Hungarian within a few years. Slovak cultural institutions such as Matica Slovenska, dissolved in 1875, were accused of subversion and their libraries confiscated. The Hungarian authorities even seized the organization's building in Turčiansky Svätý Martin, leaving Slovak educators to store books in private barns and parish houses. It is difficult to promote separatism, of course, when your organization has also been forced to hand over the furniture, the library, and the building keys. Political representation offered little comfort. The Hungarian parliament operated under an electoral structure so skewed that calling it a democracy would require an imagination fit for opera. Less than 6% of the population had the right to vote, overwhelmingly Magyar landowners and urban elites. Census categories conveniently encouraged the reclassification of minorities as Hungarian, especially Ruthenians and Germans, through the practice of recruiting bilinguals to declare Hungarian as their mother tongue in exchange for lower taxes or administrative favors. In Transylvania, where Romanians formed majorities in districts like Fogaras, Nazod, and Hatzeg, gerrymandered constituencies ensured that Romanian deputies remained a small and politically powerless minority. Romanian petitions for equal rights, filed regularly and politely, such as the Memorandum of 1866 by the Romanian National Party, were received with the same enthusiasm as unsolicited tax advice. Place names were Magyarized with gusto. Villages that had borne Slavic or Romanian names for centuries suddenly acquired elongated Hungarian versions ending in Falva, Vasárhely, or Szent Miklós. For example, the Slovak town Turčiansky Svätý Martin was officially renamed Turok Szent Márton, while Prešporok became Pozsony, and Kluj became Kolozsvár, names still used by Hungarian nationalists today. Some renamings were so enthusiastic that locals could hardly recognize their own birthplaces. Romanian-speaking Abrud was turned into Abrud Banya, emphasizing mining traditions no local Romanian had ever insisted on. It was nation-building by linguistic landscaping. In Transylvania, the situation grew increasingly tense. Romanians, the largest ethnic group, found themselves legally classified as mere tolerated nationalities, with no collective political rights despite their demographic dominance. The Transylvanian Memorandum of 1892 an articulate and remarkably calm document detailing Romanian grievances, was met with a show trial of its authors in Kolozsvár in 1894. Their crime? Politely asking not to be treated as decorative extras in their own homeland. The sentenced leaders, such as Gheorghe Pop de Băsești and Vasile Lucaciu, were imprisoned for inciting national hatred, while crowds of Hungarian loyalists celebrated outside the courthouse with patriotic dances and an impromptu brass band. Relations with Slovaks were equally strained. Slovak cultural life survived largely through church networks and a small diaspora of activists operating from the United States, such as the Slovak League in America, founded in 1907. Hungarian authorities sometimes behaved as though the Slovak language were a minor respiratory disease, regrettable, persistent, and best eradicated through firm public health measures. The arrest of Slovak priests like Andrej Linka in 1906 for inciting anti-Hungarian sentiment illustrates the government's eagerness to stifle even moderate cultural activism. Slovak newspapers, including Národné noviny, were censored or confiscated with bureaucratic efficiency. The treatment of Croats was slightly different. Croatia-Slavonia enjoyed a nominal autonomy under the 1868 Nagodba, but the compromise was more window dressing than substance. The Croatian Saber had legislative authority, but Hungarian control over railways, finances and trade gutted much of that autonomy. When the Croatian Ban Karoli Quen Hedevari governed with a heavy Magyarizing hand between 1883 and 1903, he replaced Croatian-language civil servants with Hungarian-speaking officials, provoking protests such as the 1895 student demonstrations in Zagreb, during which the Hungarian flag was burned, an act that earned dozens of students imprisonment. Perhaps the most paradoxical aspect of Hungarian policy was its insistence on an exclusive national identity in a state that was, by every demographic measure, profoundly multinational. The political logic was clear enough. Since the Magyars feared becoming a minority in their own half of the empire, they attempted to assimilate everyone else. Yet the effect was the opposite. Slovaks, Romanians, and others who might have accepted some form of civic Hungarian patriotism instead found themselves energized by resentment. Nothing awakens national consciousness more quickly than having one's national consciousness declared inconvenient. The rise of cultural societies, such as the Astra organization in Transylvania or the Slovak National Party, demonstrated how repression sometimes fertilizes identity rather than erases it. By the early 20th century, Budapest had achieved something remarkable. It had alienated most minority groups simultaneously, convincing each of them that political emancipation could never occur within the Hungarian constitutional framework. When the First World War arrived, these frustrations surfaced with explosive clarity. In 1918, Slovak leaders signed the Martin Declaration, joining the new Czechoslovakia. Romanians proclaimed union at the Great National Assembly of Alba Iulia, and the Croats walked out of the empire altogether. They did not simply reject Hungarian rule, they sprinted away from it, waving declarations of independence with the enthusiasm of students escaping a particularly uninspired lecture. In retrospect, the tragedy of Hungary's policy lies not merely in its repressive excesses but in its squandered opportunities. A more inclusive system might have stabilized the multi-ethnic kingdom and given the Habsburg monarchy a longer life. Instead, the Hungarian political elite chose to build a nation with the zeal of a tailor who insists every customer must fit into the same suit, then blames the customers when the seams burst. Examples abound. The rejection of Romanian proposals for administrative parity in 1905, the suppression of Slovak parish schools after 1898, and the arrest of Ruthenian activists like Alexander Duknovic. The historical irony is inescapable. In seeking to create a more Hungarian Hungary, the political class undermined the very state that made Hungarian self-rule possible. The result was a lesson familiar to students of imperial history. If you govern a diverse population, it is wise to persuade your minorities that they belong. Failing that, they may one day take your constitution, your borders, and your place names, and return them all, politely but firmly, marked no longer needed.